Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined by Jeff Robinson. Jeff, and to everyone, a very happy Thanksgiving here in Canada. Lots to be thankful for this year's, I'd say in particular the women's national team, the men qualifying for the next Rugby World Cup. Very thankful indeed. However, there has been a bit of news trickling in over the past week or so when it comes to Major League Rugby. And so they decided to put out a statement, because they haven't really said anything, especially with the collapse of a few of the teams and the merger of two others. So this is the statement that MLR has released. This off-season has been a time of reflection and tough choices for Major League Rugby. Running a professional league is complex, and while the departure of teams was not something we anticipated, it has provided an opportunity to reset and strengthen our foundation. Today, we're confirming Major League Rugby will be played in 2026 and beyond. The owners of Major League Rugby have an aligned vision on supporting USA Rugby, and in particular our USA Eagles. Our partnership with World Rugby, Anthem Rugby Carolina, aims to develop young American talent and prepare the USA Eagles with a focus on the 2027 and 2031 Men's Rugby World Cups. To further aid this goal, Major League Rugby will take steps from the 2026 season to increase the game day spaces available to USA Rugby qualified and pathway players to a minimum of 16 and rising from there. We are engaged in active discussions with new partners, ownership groups, and USRPA to build long-term alignment and stability that will serve the league well into the future. MLR is fueled by the love of the game, driven by the players who give everything on the field, the dedication of our team staff, and the passion of our fans. We look forward during the coming weeks and months to sharing more details on what you can look forward to in 2026, and we thank you for your patience. Now that is a big word salad if I've ever seen one. Confirming 2026 and beyond, well, maybe they're half right. But the big detail is focusing on minimum of 16 places in the matchday 23 for USA Eagles or USA pathway players as well. So I think that covers, a lot of, basically the focus is now turning MLR into a domestic focus league. And, this isn't odd or anything. This is perfectly in place with the Prem, or English Premiership as it was formerly known. It's the same as the top 14 as well. These leagues exist to further development of national players above all other things. But the big concern is that this means that Canadian players are no longer going to be listed as domestic, which they have been since 2019. So the issue for Canadian players is that now they're going to be competing against players from New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, England, Scotland. I know there's been a few Welsh players that have come over as well. And, I think the issue with this is the timing more than anything else. I think if they had said, okay, from 2027, we're going to focus on, the US pathway players, USA Eagles players, stuff like that. Now teams have basically been told, you've got 6 months to fill your squad and, 16 of your matchday 23 have to be US eligible players. And I think the issue is from a Canadian player perspective is a number of these players have been in contracts to play for their MLR club, such as the Free Jacks, beyond 2026, or even just including 2026. So are their contracts now null and void? Do they get any fair representation? Is this something that you can bring up with the US RPA? or is their focus now on the American players in MLR? There's a lot of questions have come from this. Jeff, give us your thoughts on this statement.
Well, there's a lot. My first thought is the key detail, or the most important detail from that statement is actually not even there. It's how
Mm,
many teams will there be in MLR? They don't even actually state
mm,
that. Because Utah, there's still rumors around. Regarding the player contracts, what I have been told is all the contracts have been, for lack of a better word, torn up. And now
mm,
every player is going to be centrally signed. And I guess they'll somehow the teams will choose which players which. So you don't sign with a team that you sign with MLR with Major League Rugby. I guess that covers the New England Free Jackets situation. Uh,
mm,
getting to this, like our Canadians domestic or now imports, which it does look like will be imports. And regarding what you said about timing, the timing is completely horrendous. I mean,
mm,
because the draft has already happened. Canadian
mhm.
players were selected in the draft. How do these teams feel now about that? It's if you're going to do this and you're going to make every non-USA player import, which okay, I can understand it. I can, I will never agree with it, but I can understand it. You should have grandfathered in the previous players that were considered domestic
Yeah.
and the players who are non-American that were drafted by MLR.
Mm,
Give those two stipulations, and I actually would have been not happy, but I would have been okay with it. But because it does throw all of this into literally lack of a better term, chaos, because the original rumor was it was going to be I think it was 18 players had to be American or considered domestic in the
mm,
match day 23. Now it's 16, so have they made two slots for Canadians for every team?
mm.
Or is it just they just decreased the amount overall? So yeah, not happy. Uh, I know a lot of people are saying, well, the Canadians should put up money or no, get their own team. I've said this previously on this podcast. You're talking about a league where four teams have literally folded in the offseason. Utah is still rumors. There's actually now rumors about the new California Legion may not even make the 2026 season. So why would anyone invest money into this league at this point?
Yeah.
American, Canadian, anybody. It honestly it make no sense. You guys are by you guys I mean Major League Rugby. They need to clean up their house, get their house in order. Houston dropping out was a big red flag to anyone. They were
Yeah.
one of the biggest supporters of Major League Rugby. And from what I heard, the Miami Sharks, they had no like they weren't making money, but their owners had deep pockets. There'd been
Mm,
no real reason why they would have suddenly dropped out either, unless it's internal MLR dysfunction or different views of the goal,
yeah.
what the league should be. Uh, and clearly now, by that statement, their goal is to funnel players to USA Rugby and to
Yeah.
the national team.
Because this has been a concern amongst a lot of American MLR fans was that, we now have this professional competition where American players can get more playing time. Why isn't the national team doing better? And my response to that has always been, well, MLR is a private institution. It is sanctioned by USA Rugby, but its goal is building a profitable league within the United States, or let me be more accurate, North America. Um, there was when Bill Webb set up the Toronto Arrows, his view was that Canadians would be considered international for the other teams, but for the Arrows, Americans would be considered international. So that would be the fair recompense in that way that so you could have a Canadian team and not be, you know, hampered by having all your squad be listed as foreign and then be either commit fines or just have a bunch of Americans playing in Toronto. And so the question is now, where do Canadian players, and I'd say I'm not saying just Rugby Canada, I'm saying Canadian rugby as a whole, go from here. There's BC Rugby News pointed out that the BC Premier League is the highest level of amateur competition in the country. Obviously, its climate allows for rugby to take place year round. They also mentioned that we've had the Coast to Coast Cup grow and develop over the past few years. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. And, it may be worth Rugby Canada, Rugby Ontario, Rugby Quebec, and I'll say like Rugby Nova Scotia, but the Atlantic provinces and their respective rugby unions.
Privateers, that club. Yes.
Yes, I think it's worth looking into setting up a competition in Eastern Canada, which takes place in tandem to MLR. Obviously, I'm just spitting ideas here. I'm not saying anything's in place. But I did get asked the question, why doesn't Canada have rugby teams set up in some of its like busy or biggest cities? And I basically, because this person was British as well, and I said, okay, I'll put it like this. Let's say you have a team set up in Toronto and a team set up in Ottawa. Two of the, capital of Ontario and the capital of Canada, two of the biggest cities, airports, all those links whatsoever. That would be the rugby equivalent of Saracens playing their nearest opponents, which would then become the Newcastle Red Bulls. That's how far Toronto is from Ontario. Because people don't seem to realize how big Canada is until there's something they can equate to. So if I say, okay, the Saracens, if they were going to play their local derby, they would have to drive 350 kilometers north to play the Newcastle Red Bulls and then do the reverse fixture. And then their nearest rival would be, somewhere in Germany or somewhere in Austria or like the southern tip of Italy. That's the distance we're talking about when it comes to rugby in Canada. I mean, it's the biggest issue that has affected any startup league in North America is overcoming the distance.
Yes.
And yeah,
You need
it's just
investors who don't mind
yeah,
dropping on. Yes.
you need to have like you need to find rugby fans who are also on the board of airlines and stuff like that. You need to have hoteliers who are rugby fans as well. And I think I'm not saying, those are going to come around within like the next 6 months, but I think for Canada to try and develop its own rugby scene, I know that Jeff, you'd posted of like, oh, maybe we can bring back the Canadian Rugby Championship on X. I think that's a an option, and I think the Coast to Coast Cup can do a way of helping build that talent. But I think we need to have more teams in it, but within the provinces. We can't just have the Ontario Blues and Rugby Quebec and the Atlantic Privateers. For provinces as big as Quebec and Ontario, I think you can have like multiple teams in them. And you know, maybe it is a team in Toronto and a team in Ottawa, maybe a team in Hamilton as well, maybe one in Kingston. And then you have four teams that don't have to travel as far to play each other. And then when you get to like the finals round of competition, that's when the East Coast and the West Coast fly out and face off against one another. But that this is just me spitballing. It's the reality is it's a really crappy position for the Canadian MLR players to have been put into, and
And then ironically, a defense to Rugby Canada, I don't think they could have seen this coming. Yes.
No, no, absolutely not. I think this is a panicked response from MLR,
Oh yeah.
and
It completely changed their course.
yeah, I think I think there's been underlying issues with the league since its inception. There's tons of commenters and videos pointing out like the potential flaws. Like it grew too big. It was relying on uh, a gym magnate to support two of the teams, and we then found out that he was cooking the books. And
I once
yeah,
privately commented to another rugby person that MLR, I said this like a couple times, but I started like 3 or 4 years ago. MLR almost comes across like a Ponzi scheme. It's just like,
yeah,
yeah, it was always just get new investors. And those who started out were the ones that were secretly making the money. I mean, obviously, with Houston leaving, that was not the case. But I
mm,
mean, it's just the way that they just kept seeming to rely on, was it membership fees or
yeah,
like
growth
franchise
and
fees, franchise
yeah,
fees.
franchise feeing, and there was this rumored inclusion fee that, or was like you need to have the liquid capital to show that you can support a team. And back in 2019, I believe it was reported as 15 million. And speaking with some of the head honchos at the time within MLR, they were saying that as soon as the USA gets the Men's Rugby World Cup, that fee is going to increase. So that's why you had teams like Dallas who originally invested back in 2018 but didn't show up until 2022. But they had already paid their membership fee. So they didn't have to fork out any extra money on top of what they'd already paid to get to where they are. And growing pains has always been a challenge of any North American sports league. Like MLS, they were back in 2001, they were struggling to ensure the league could continue. They had a period where you had three teams under one ownership group as well. You had multiple teams under multiple owners, and now you look at the success of MLS and how well that's doing and how strong that is looking going into the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And we've also had all this debate of like, oh, World Rugby is spending $250 million on growth of rugby in the USA. And
Yeah, I'm not so sure they are anymore. It seems like they're spending a lot of it to promote tests they want to host in the US.
oh yeah,
Like,
no, oh
yeah,
let me use my wording very clearly. They are doing it to promote rugby within the USA. They are not promoting USA rugby. That is an entirely different thing. And I think World Rugby are at the point where it's like we can't take away the World Cup, the Men's World Cup from the USA at this point without incurring a big financial hit. And I think that, now is the time to, knuckle down and yeah, get some of those big international tests in the USA so you can increase the fan base, increase the audience figure so that yeah, people may know who the All Blacks are and they may know who the Springboks are, but do they know who the Wallabies are? Do they know who the Pumas are? That's games that you can have in the United States, and with World Rugby providing that financial backing. And, make it a double header. Have the USA host, I don't know, Portugal or something. Have them against a team that they could reasonably on paper hold themselves up against. And then it's followed up by the big match that everyone came to see.
do do you think the World Cup will be a success in 2031? I'm not convinced it will be.
it depends on what you define as a success.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
like I think
think,
it'll make money. It'll make
yeah,
money.
I think if I would look at the Men's Rugby World Cup in 2031 not as the FIFA World Cup that's happening next year, but as the FIFA World Cup in the 80s that brought a large portion of the North American audience to soccer. Like,
I don't
and
think
this,
it will. I actually don't think it will. I don't think it will. Uh, I think the big four sports and then soccer are so ingrained in the US, and there's no real good timing to put the World Cup on in the US. I think the US, I think World Rugby really missed the boat by actually not giving one pool to Canada and making,
mm,
give USA the home game, give them the gold medal game, the bronze, probably both semis. Give Canada, like I said, their own pool, and then maybe one or two quarterfinals, just to spread it around. Uh, because when you're gonna host it here, was it gonna be September, October? You got
I
the
think,
NFL,
yeah. The
you
thing
got
is,
the
if
NFL starting up,
in
you got the
Australia they're
NHL.
hosting it in
Yeah.
October, November, so there's a good 3 month window that you can have this competition in. And I
The,
agree, as in they're always going to have to be competing with the NFL to show these games. So, but
the worst part
from
is,
yeah,
I think they'll have it September, October mostly in US, maybe
mm,
a bit later to try to avoid a bit of the weather, the extreme heat down south.
yeah,
But you got the NFL that's going to be starting up. You got the NHL that's just started. You got baseball in their playoffs. You got basketball starting up. It's the you're going to be fighting tooth and nail to get any media to cover this.
mm.
Like
But
I'm going to be
in the same sense, is that what they're doing in the build up to the World Cup by hosting
they're trying to mitigate
uh
that, and
yeah,
yeah,
and by hosting teams that aren't the USA in big games, such as, New Zealand versus South Africa, and they're going to try, but they're not trying to get Americans to come here. They're trying to get New Zealand Americans. They're trying to get South African Americans. They're trying to get,
they already have them.
yes, but they want more. They want people to travel from New Zealand, from South Africa to come to these games so that then when the World Cup comes around, they're going to be able to have these fans, these traveling fans come, and they're going to be the ones that are going to go to this game or these games. And, I don't know whether it'll work or not. I don't know whether it'll be the success that World Rugby is hoping it can be. But I think in the same way that, as I said, MLS was failing in 2001, and in the 80s they hosted a FIFA World Cup. 80s on that. See, this is my soccer knowledge is very limited that I don't even know when the USA last hosted the FIFA World Cup, but it's not going to be quick.
It's early
It's
'90s.
yeah, early maybe 94,
Yeah, something like 93,
94,
94.
94. Um yeah, but well in that case that makes my example even better because it was 7 years since the USA had hosted the World Cup, and then their domestic league nearly went belly up. It's not the impression it's going to have on the people it needs to is not going to be quick. It's not going to be soon. But if it does work out, then we could be in a place where in like 25th in the 2050s, America is hosting the biggest men's rugby World Cup we've ever seen. Expanding that to 48 teams for all we know, and it could be the dawn of a new age. So I think, yeah, it's very easy to be skeptical, but I think there's a bit of optimism that, I just have to look at because if all else, it's just going to be
I
doom and
just
gloom.
I just think World Rugby would have been better off because I don't think hosting one or two tier one tests in the US a year in the lead up to this World Cup is going to be that beneficial. for them. I think they would have been better off trying to prop up Major League Rugby and keeping it more viable to bigger comp and trying to expand the grassroots that way. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I think. I think they're putting the money in the wrong place, and I think they're putting money more just to keep the tier one teams happy. So,
Yeah, most likely.
negative
But
view,
uh,
very negative view, but I mean, yes.
yeah, I mean, well, we'll see. And they've got what, 6 years to turn it around. We'll see if that comes to pass. But let's talk about something that is going to be far more sooner. International games. So it's confirmed by Rugby Canada that they have their test matches set up for this November tour. So it was confirmed they are going to be facing three European countries in Europe in their respective in these respective countries. So unlike last year where Canada played against Chile in Romania, these games are going to be all across Europe. We start off on November 8th against Romania. That will be in Bucharest. And that is going to be for the new cup that was introduced last year. It signifies the partnership between Canada and Romania with their use of the nuclear reactor. I am going to absolutely butcher the name, but the Cernavodă Cup. And, you know, two nations working together. They say in the press release is that the Cernavodă nuclear power plant has two Canadian CAN-DU reactors, been part of a bilateral relationship that the energy provided by those units provides Romania with 18% of its total electricity, which is, pretty neat. That's a pub quiz answer if I've ever heard one. The next game will be against Georgia. That will be in Batumi. And the final game on November 22nd will be against Portugal. And that has been now confirmed in Estadio Cidade de Coimbra. So Coimbra is located in north central Portugal. It's the fourth largest city and municipality after Lisbon, Porto, and Braga, and has about 460,000 people living in there. So yeah, when this information was first announced, that stadium had not been confirmed, but we now have a confirmation of the kickoff time and the location. So the game against Romania will be at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The game against Georgia on November 15th will be 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And the final game against Portugal will be at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So two, you know, brunch games and one that is definitely a breakfast game on the East Coast and a little bit earlier on the West. Um, so looking at this, Romania, Georgia, and Portugal. Jeff, what do you think of the Canadian men's team's odds on getting a couple of wins out of this tournament, or who's
Without
most
seeing
likely?
Without seeing the squads, it's a bit hard to say. I mean, two games they should definitely be targeting as winnable.
Hmm.
But Georgia will probably be a game too far, unless they convince their Euro guys to show up for that.
Hmm.
Uh, Looking at the squad, I would try to get Olmsted, Ardron, any other Canadian qualified Boom players just to
Hmm.
come up for the Georgia game. I mean, this is the time to mend fences and
Yeah.
stuff. They did it with two players. There are other Canadian eligible players in Europe. I mean, I don't know if they ever approached them, uh,
Yeah.
but it's, I mean, you can say just please come up for that game. Mhm, yes.
Yeah.
Uh, Portugal and Romania will definitely be squad depth building games, win or lose, and this is the time to get these guys experience. So definitely, I guess 2 out of 3 is what their goal will be. 1 out of 3 is probably more realistic,
Hmm.
but that's without seeing the squads. And I'll be very curious to see who the squad is because I've heard some rumors about players that are in and players that are out.
Yeah.
So.
So yeah, in the press release, Stephen Meehan mentioned the following. This tour is about identifying areas where we can continue to improve our performances while also giving opportunities to a few players who weren't part of the Pacific Nations Cup but could play a key role in our World Cup campaign. Qualification has created healthy competition within the squad, with more players putting their hands up for selections. Over the next 15 to 18 months, our task is to ensure Canada is as prepared as possible when we take the field in Australia in 2027. So that kind of wording kind of makes me think that Olmsted and Ardron may not be the guys that Meehan is looking for. It may be he's having chats with Booker Boom. I know that when Ardron came over to join the squad, he had made it clear, and the same with Olmsted, is that they were only available for the first game against the USA, and then they'd have to return to their clubs in France. And it's been mentioned before that basically the clubs in France basically pay the mortgage. So what they say goes. And you
Fair
don't want
enough.
you don't want to step you don't want to step on any toes and stuff. And especially this is the same time as the autumn internationals for France against they're going to be facing off against South Africa. I think that's going to be a very big game. But while this is going on, the top 14 and the D2 is going on as well, and they want their squads to be as strong as possible. So they may say it's not a World Cup game, so no, or well, not use those words exactly, just heavily incentivize why they should be choosing club over country, which is, not what we want to see, but it's the nature of the beast. And
At this far out of the World Cup, I can stomach it
yeah,
if it's
yeah,
available.
the important thing is job's done, and Canada is going to the World Cup. Um, and we now have, as we mentioned, like 2 years just under to ensure that we have the best team available, and we can have the best squad available at the World Cup, but beforehand we can have guys applying their trade in France or in Europe, and you know a lot of French teams do have really good facilities, so maybe that's the best choice for them to be there. So again, those games are in November. So there is no international Canadian matches to watch this weekend, unfortunately. But if you are looking to watch any games, you can do so on Sportsnet Plus, where the Premiership and URC is taking place. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more, as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. We also have our podcast on Spotify and on YouTube. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at the Rouge Rugby. Jeff, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X at WP Rugby Jeff.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Jeff, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.